Hello, welcome everybody. Everybody's streaming in, coming in. I like to think of this as the time everyone's taking their seats. Are you a person that takes a front row seat or do you like the back row? Um, where would you usually sit in an event? Uh, that's what I like to think of this moment as, where people are sitting. Welcome, everyone. My name is Ellie Demarchelier. I have bright copper hair and I'm wearing a white shirt underneath a rust jacket. And I'm wearing some rust lipstick just to go with it. I'm a proud disability rights campaigner, and we're back for another open dialogue. For those who have not been to one yet, oh, well, you're in for a treat. Think of it as a live show where you control the conversation. It is designed to be inclusive, accessible, collaborative, respectful, and most importantly, fun. I want to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land on which we gather. I am on the land of the Yagara and Turrbal people. I recognize their continued connection to the land and waters of this beautiful place and acknowledge that they never ceded sovereignty. I respect all elders and ancestors and any First Nations people joining us today. I also want to remind people about our rules of engagement. We need to keep the conversation respectful and inclusive. When you join our open dialogue, you agree to rules that keep everyone safe. A link to these rules of engagement are in the chat now. We have an amazing show for you tonight and some really great guests. First up, we'll have a brief update from Emma Myers, who's Power Deed correspondent in federal parliament and is also an award-winning screenplay writer. Then we'll have our we'll have our hot take segment. Then we get to take a deep dive for tonight where we'll speak with Alicia and Veronica about disability representation in the media. And last but not least, we'll have an update on the results from our disability discovery project. It's a packed show, so let's get to it. Of course, we are using our civility feedback tool. If you haven't attended one of these events before, you can either log in through your phone or use the link in the chat. We also know a lot of people will be watching this as a recording, and the good news is that we will have the feedback tool open for the next fortnight, so you can enter the ideas in too. You know the drill. You'll see the QR code appear on the screen and there'll be a link in the chat. For those using a laptop, grab your phone and use the QR code that will appear on the screen, or click the link in the chat. Fill out the questions and hit submit or next when you're ready to move to the next question or slide. It's designed so that you can go at your own pace. Jump on now and let us know that you're ready to go by hitting the heart button. We'll give you a few seconds to jump on before we get to the questions. And we'll do that. It's always great to be part of the conversation using this tool. So grab your phone out and make sure you use that QR code. Before we get stuck into tonight, I love nothing more than a good icebreaker question. So let me know, what would the title be for your autobiography? I'm interested to know, Todd, what would your autobiography be called?
My autobiography is going to be a bit cheeky. It's going to be a picture of me sitting in my wheelchair with the front cover, and the title is going to be Standing Up for Myself.
Love it. A good pun. Gotta love that. And Elle, I firstly cannot wait until your book comes out. That's going to be very exciting. But what is it going to be called?
hilarious. I can't believe anyone would want to read a memoir, an autobiography about me, Ellie, but
Yeah.
I could write one
I'll
about
be
the
first in
NDIS.
line.
Look, I think
That's number two.
the grumpy optimist would be my title, I reckon.
Oh my God, it's perfect and I love it. I love that people have just named their autobiography Tired. I totally get that. Um, don't take my advice. So what happened next? Be the change maker you want to see. Oh, that's a bit more inspirational. Um, the hard road. We're on the road to nowhere. Uh, I love these. There's a real mix of inspiration and just hard knocks. WTF? I feel that. Or FFS. Feel that too. Uh, can I ask, is Sue only there? Can Sue, what would you call your autobiography?
My God, I would never in a million years write an autobiography. I love to read them, but I wouldn't. But I think it would definitely have to be my social media descriptor, which is lifelong learner.
Oh, that's like that is you in a little summary. How fabulous. Um, Emma, you would write an incredible autobiography. You've already done so much. What would it be called?
Um, my biography would be called uh What the Bleep is My Life.
That could be positive or negative. I love it. There's another WTF and just keep swimming. I think we're all feeling the end of year tiredness at this point by this. Thanks everyone for contributing. That's a great way to start. Uh, now I'm gonna now go next up. We are really lucky to have our special Canberra correspondent Emma Myers joining us from the National Capital. As a Federal Press Gallery journalist, I get to ask Emma some questions, which is really cool. Emma, um, how is Parliament going? It seems to be moving at a fast pace. It's the final sitting week. What do you think are the biggest topics that everyone is focused on right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ellie. I think at the moment, well, we just had Bill Shorten uh do his victory speech in Parliament last week, and so I think everyone is asking themselves now, who will be the next member for the minister for the NDIS, and uh, can it get worse, or where do we go from here? Um, I also I'm also keen to find out what the response from the NDIS review will be, because that's coming up in a few weeks. And then I think we're all just waiting for it to, I think we're just waiting for the year to end. Um, so we can just
Exhaustion is hitting.
have a clean slate in the new year and onwards and upwards.
Positive, I love it. But is there anything coming up that we should be aware of? Anything before the year finishes that is, really gonna hit?
Yeah. Yes. So at the moment, the Department of Social Services is taking consultations with the disabled community on what they want from foundational supports, which is going to exist outside of the NDIS for people who aren't on the NDIS or who only use disability or health services um, on occasion rather than full time. Um, so I think we're all wondering how that will come into fruition.
Yeah, foundational supports is certainly an unknown quantity at the moment that is really playing on everyone's mind. Can you, Emma, thank you so much. Can you just remind us quickly how to get in touch with you if there's a story we think you should cover?
Yes, so you can get in touch with me via LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. And if you can't decipher my name from the actress from the Tim Burton series of Wednesday, just type in Emma Myers disability into Google and my ugly face appears.
Oh. Well, that there's many ways to get in touch, which is great. Thank you so much. I'm interested, Elle and Todd, I'll get Elle to go first. What do you reckon the biggest issue is facing the new NDIS minister?
Where do we start, Ellie? As Emma said, there's a lot on the table in terms of reforms. The NDIS review, we're also expecting the 6-monthly update on whether the government's going to do more than 13 recommendations on the Disability Royal Commission. There's a huge amount of changes about the NDIS, about foundational supports, about what everything is going to look like. So I think it's about committing to including people with disability in what happens next, not making decisions for us, without us, and making sure that our expertise is front and centre in what comes next. I'm trying to be diplomatic because I'm extremely tired and prone to undiplomatic outbursts, but I am worried about how little say that I think disabled people are going to get over some things. But the election, is a good time for disabled people to be flexing our political muscles, as we've done many, many times before. And it will be a good chance for all of us to make it really clear that this matters to us a great deal, and we expect our politicians to deliver for our community.
Todd, what do you think is the biggest issue facing the new NDIS minister?
Well, because Elle's being diplomatic, I won't be. Because Bill Shorten's basically dropped the mic and said, thanks very much, I'm out of here. He's also dropped the ball. Not only do we have an unresponsive way for the Royal Commission, Elle said there's been 13 recommendations that the government has chosen to decide to implement in full out of 222. That's 6%. Bill Shorten announced the NDIS review with great fanfare and said it was the most significant policy document related to disability in this country. But here we are a year later. The government hasn't done anything. We're 6 months away, or maybe even sooner, in regards to a federal election. What's the government doing? It has no idea. And as for the alternative government, where is the minister? Michael Stucker. He's had 3 years, hasn't done a thing. So not only have we got a policy back in, the government has promised basically everything for policy with regard to disability. It's got not only one, but 2 roadmaps. And the government have basically said, no, we're not going to do anything. So that's what I have concerns about. And it's got less than 6 months to do something, and it's already had 2.5 years. So what are they going to do?
Interesting. Tell us what you really think, Todd. I would say some people would suggest the government's done too much, and so that's an interesting take. But I'm going to leave that there because I think the next segment is going to have us riled up even more. So I don't need to rile you up. on this one. If you've ever been to one of these before, you know the way we structure these dialogues is to have an open discussion on issues that interest our panelists and then deep dive into a specific issue. Next up is our hot take segment of this event. We've got a packed schedule tonight, so time for only one provocation. It's a provocation that already had us fired up backstage. So I think it's good that we only have one for tonight, which is going to come from Todd. So Todd, I understand your provocation relates to International Day of People with Disability, which is coming up on the 3rd of December. Your provocation asks, who benefits? Is International Day of People with Disability more about creating positive PR for non-disabled individuals, organisations and governments than actually addressing or highlighting the urgent needs of the disability community? Now, take over the floor. Give us your thoughts, Todd.
Sure. Well, personally, I've never been a really big fan of the International Day with Disability because as a person with a disability, I'm kind of like, disability provides enough challenges in my life. What am I exactly celebrating? But if we look outward, there seems to be a lot of activity at this time of year for events within the sector, and it's really important internally that we recognise the gains that everybody has made in regards to disability. So I can respect that. But my concern is, does it get the penetration outside the disability sector? Much related to my previous comments about the NDIS review and the Royal Commission. If anything, this is a day to highlight the injustice we face as a community. But aside from a couple of nice documentaries and TV series on ABC iView, what is the penetration of the International Day of People with a Disability outside the sector? Do we have people with disabilities on corporate boards or front and centre on around the decision-making table? We've heard the word co-design to death. The International Day of Disability is really about putting co-design in action and pushing forward leadership opportunities beyond the disability sector of people with disabilities. And unfortunately, we've had over 40 of these days since it was established in 1981. And what are the gains that people with disabilities have made amongst the general community, pushing aside the enormous gains that we've made in the disability sector? It's time to look beyond those boundaries and sort of ascertain what gains have we really made and how can we push beyond the glass ceiling of disability.
I totally agree with you, Todd. My perspective on this is I think disabled people should just completely take over International Day of People with Disability, and we should use it to organise, and decide how we want to move forward. Moving on from our last conversation and get on the front foot of what we want to do and actually use the day for productive good instead of just talking about niceties. We could organise and use it for action. Elle, your thoughts on International Day of People with Disability? Is it just about making non-disabled people feel good?
Look, I think you're right that it is a day of how we make it, but Todd's absolutely right in terms of highlighting that we want a hell of a lot more than what's on offer. So a lot of the time I see, honestly, I got a media release. I'll give you an example. I got a media release from an organisation that really does try and do mostly okay things, a big NGO. And they're like, here's the 4 things you can do for disability inclusion. And it was kind of create a good culture. Well, how the hell do they do that? There was no thing about hire a disabled person or 2. Like they didn't actually have that as one of the things that they could do. There were no concrete things. It was all this fluffy stuff, and they're releasing it in this big fanfare. I was lucky enough yesterday to give a talk to a really great organisation called DRC Advocacy. They do advocacy in Melbourne. You've often seen them doing protests in front of trams and stuff. And so it was a really good opportunity to, be well, maybe not now, but my rah-rah self about what we want. And I've been thinking a lot about the NDIS this year and about what comes next, about foundational supports, about what it looks like, and whether we can ask for a hell of a lot more and demand a hell of a lot more than we got out of the NDIS. So providers, for example, they haven't employed disabled people. They've got bigger and bigger. There's very few of them that are run by disabled people, particularly now that Doogie has retired to his garden and no longer is running service provider in Canberra. But I think that, we're not there running services. We're not in control. We're not, benefiting from any of this money or employment that's come into the so-called care and support sector. There's been very little change in workplaces. The biggest change to inclusion came from COVID. It didn't come from employers suddenly going, whoops, we should include disabled people. Like, I'm now a senior person and I employ a lot of people. I'm a manager of a lot of people. Most of our staff are disabled people and most of our leadership are disabled people. It is not that hard to do. It's and we get great results because it is an organisation run by disabled people. I am heartily sick of excuses. And I think it's time that we call out this exclusion that is actually practiced by so many people. I've been going back and doing some old reading of things like the social model of disability and some of the original writing that was done at the time. And they talk about things like, being excluded and being isolated. And like for so much of our community, that is still the reality now, all the years later since that was developed. So, I think I want to get back to that. I want to get back to thinking about how we make change for so many of our community that live in poverty and how we actually ask all of those people who make a living out of us to demand from them a whole lot more.
I seem to remember, Elle, at the beginning of this term of government, the NDIS Jobs and Skills Summit, the ask was a mandatory 15% of workers in the disability sector were disabled. And I took that to the Jobs and Skills Summit and demanded that of the Jobs and Skills Summit, and it has seemed to have fallen off the radar. Maybe we should organise to get it back on. Someone has mentioned in the comments, and it is so right, like it frustrates the hell out of me. On International Day of People with Disability, people with disability are always asked to do free labor, to present, to organize, like to talk, to explain to people. It's the day, it's like International Women's Day when the morning teas are always organised and run by women. It's the same with International Day of People with Disability. So I guess that leads me to the question, is this a problem unique to International Day of People with Disability or a problem with all of these kinds of days? What's different about our International Day, Elle?
Look, I think it is that stuff where so much of what happens to us doesn't kind of penetrate, as you were saying, Todd. It just doesn't get through. Like, I know earlier this year when we were all up to our armpits in NDIS legislation and fighting to make change and doing all of the amendments, and then when the Royal Commission response came out from government, silence, like absolute silence from people around, from progressive people that I'm, engaged with, other communities, other campaigning communities, who were like, oh, what Royal Commission was that again? Or that one into disabled people? I'm like, no, that's not what it was. And it really is, sorry, I've got a rogue kitten in the house and she's very keen to join in the conversation. So she's just popping in to say hi. If you see her crawling around in the background. But yeah, so I think that stuff about exclusion is all over the place. Like the things that matter to us don't seem to engage other people in the same way. But I do think it is that going out to those spaces and demanding to be included and demanding to be on the agenda and making a fuss when we're not. Like, I think that's one of the things. Maybe I'm just old enough to don't care anymore and I'll just do it. But to be annoying, I feel like is like half my job description at the moment. And to just, be annoying on behalf of my community, I will go out and do that.
That's my full job description, Elle, is just like permanent troublemaker. So I totally understand. Todd, it's not a problem, exclusive to us, some of these problems that becomes tokenistic. I definitely feel that on International Women's Day, I've got to say, like, if I get one more purple cupcake or like a breakfast, which is the most inconvenient type of event ever, I'm going to scream. But Elle's right in terms of we just don't seem to get the attention on our day as other days do. Everyone can kind of know that International Women's Day is the 8th of March. I know that off the top of my head. I had to research if it was the 2nd or 3rd of December, International Day of People with Disability. Why don't we get the attention it deserves?
Well, the depressing irony of the Royal Commission is that it basically spent all this money, $60 million of taxpayers' money, saying that we have all these systems in place. We have the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disability. We have the Disability Discrimination Act. We have all these systems in place, but the government aren't enforcing them. And International Day of People with Disabilities is a microcosm of the entire Royal Commission saying we have the structure in place, but does the wider society and the government actually care or want to enforce these structures that we have around us? So when we're talking about how are we getting cut through, it's about how can we relate to the wider community to even start having the conversation. It's not enough to have tokenistic days or pieces of legislation or international conventions, because the government on paper, the community on paper, the sector on paper have done all the right things, but what really has it achieved?
Yeah, I had a very interesting conversation about how we redefine inclusion, because at the moment inclusion just seems to mean access, and that's not enough anymore. Well, it's certainly not enough for me. As always, our panel for the hot takes has really brought it tonight. Thank you, Elle and Todd. We'll be coming back to you to ask questions throughout the night. But moving right along, next up is our deep dive into disability inclusion in the media. There comes that word again, inclusion. Let's see if it's actually happening. Tonight, we're going to explore a really important and interesting subject of people with disabilities representation in the media and entertainment sectors. I think we can all agree that representation has increased, but is the representation authentic and meaningful? According to Screen Australia's Seeing Ourselves 2 report, between 2016 and 2021, only 6.6% of main characters in Australian TV dramas were depicted as having a disability, despite people with disabilities comprising over 20% of the population. This marked an increase from 3.6% in 2016, but the rate of progress is slow, highlighting ongoing underrepresentation. Challenges also exist behind the screen. Industry consultations reveal that systemic barriers often prevent people with disabilities from participating in media roles. This limits relatable portrayals and opportunities for inclusion. We all know the adage, you have to see it to be it. The question remains, are we seeing reality, truth, and a range of faces, voices to reflect our community's diversity? Tonight, we have the privilege to hear from some of the country's most experienced players in this space. Not only will we hear their thoughts on the current state of representation, but also hear some potential ways to improve representation in Australia. Let me bring up Alicia Staples and Veronica Wayne. Hi, Alicia. Hi, Veronica. Alicia, you might recognise from the show Better Date Than Never. We're also joined by Veronica, who works at Bus Stop Films, which is a disability-led production company. What a dynamic duo. Welcome. Can I make sure you...
Thanks for
Hi.
having us. Yep, thank
Hello,
you.
everyone.
Can I just let everyone know we also have an open-ended question in the feedback tool for everyone. That question is, how do you think disability is being represented in the media? Feel free to also put your thoughts in the chat. Before we get started, I'd love for each of you to introduce yourselves. So please, Veronica, you go first.
Well, hello. I have a few roles in life. One of them that I particularly enjoy is I am Alicia's mum. So that is one of the big reasons I found myself quite a few years ago, becoming very interested in the way in which disability was represented. And I actually ended up making a feature-length documentary and doing a PhD on media and representation when Alicia was around 10 years old. Some of the things that were involved there that I still think are really pertinent is that any time Alicia, within my ethical clearance, Alicia has the rite of passage as an adult to say, I no longer wish that video to be accessible to the public. This was very important to me because as a parent of a person with disability, up until a certain age, we as parents all make decisions on behalf of our children. But it was important then that I handed over the reins to Alicia's representation as an adult woman. Funnily enough, Alicia just loves being in front of the camera. I don't know how that happened. She's been performing and dancing since she was 8 years of age and has absolutely loved it. So I jumped on board the journey and fortunately have found myself working in a class parallel to Alicia in Brisbane with Bus Stop Films, where we work with people with disability each week, where it is a co-design, a co-production, a co-written film that we make together each year. And it's very much driven by the stories and the ways in which the students who come and spend time with us as a class each Sunday, how they want to tell stories. So, fantastic, Priya. I look forward to seeing you at the showcase. You'll see the films that we've made this year. So, yeah, and working with bus stops is a delight for me, and working with Alicia is also a delight for me. So I'll hand over to you, Alicia.
Thank you, Veronica. Hi, everyone. My name's Alicia. I'm 29 years old, and I am a proud person with intellectual disability. And I am a representative of several different things, but I love being in front of the camera, and I've been part of Bus Stop Films for 4 years now, and I just want to say I'm really glad to be a part of this open dialogue with everyone and hoping to hear a lot of feedback about inclusion.
Amazing. What a fantastic mother-daughter duo you both are. I love to see it. Before we get into questions for our amazing panelists, we just wanted to get a sense about how we feel in the room. Are we happy with how people with disabilities are being portrayed? Do we feel it's authentic? Let's see what we think. We've got some feedback through the first question. Someone said it often feels like such a performance whenever it happens. Non-disabled people just show up on screen and nobody needs to make it a comment about it. I want that for us. Representation has increased, but it does not feel diverse given the diversity that exists within disability, types of disabilities, and other layers of intersectionality. I think it's getting there much better than when I was a kid. There's not enough diversity, someone said. Can the person behind the scenes go to the next question, please? So we're asking you to rate on a scale. Are people with disability shown in an authentic way? 0 obviously being strongly disagree, and 10 being strongly agree. If we could get some people responding, that would be wonderful. It's currently sitting at 1, so a 1.5. We've put the link in the chat so you can jump on there. We've got 1.8. I'm not sure that 10 is the top number. But 1.8 is the top number is 5. Thank you, everyone. Well, we're sitting at 1.8 after a few responses. Maybe I'll go to you, Veronica. What do you think, both those responses to the open-ended question and the fact that we've had quite a few responses now, and we're out of 5, we're sitting at 1.8 for people with disabilities are shown in an authentic way. Does this reflect your experience?
Look, I think that we're still really struggling for across the board authentic representation. We had a little bit of a chat about this as we were preparing for this particular event today. And certainly there is a big, sorry, there's some background noise there, I'm sorry. There is a big issue around people with disability being in charge of how they are seen. And so I guess one of the programs, I don't know if anyone has seen it, but Latecomers was an absolutely fantastic series. Love it if there's any comments there about if anyone has seen the Latecomers, but it was commissioned by by SBS. Hannah Davini co-wrote
our lovely Emma Myers wrote Latecomers.
Did you, Emma? Oh my God! Oh gosh! Oh, that's a good thing.
I'm a co-creator and co-writer of it.
Well, there you go. See, again,
I actually wasn't sure whether you knew or not, and it's the first time I've actually assumed that someone knew who I was.
Well, because I've seen you in a different position here, with your other hat on. So I guess, and that absolutely speaks volumes, Emma, I guess, is the fact that a person with disability wrote the series, drove the series, and that translates to seeing representation on screen that has true authenticity when you're in charge of telling your own stories.
And
can I jump in here and ask Emma, while I've got you on the screen, why do you think so many disabled people find Latecomers so authentic and so relatable to their lives? What about it have that magic sauce in it?
I guess because we're not portrayed because we were adamant that these characters weren't going to be portrayed as innocent bystanders, or they weren't going to be ruled by their friends, and it was centered around them and from their perspective rather than anyone else's. Also, I think the characters are just really relatable. They like to shit stir on the odd occasion. So and they've got personality. They're 4-dimensional characters, and I guess that's why a lot of people enjoyed it. And I have to say, Veronica, you mentioned that you did your thesis on representation on screen. I actually did my honours on the creation of Latecomers, and it's now become a university text for more academic analysis and conversation.
Congratulations.
That's wonderful. We've
Yeah.
had a question come through from the chat from Tara and Emma. Did you get feedback that some people felt actually uncomfortable with the authenticity? Like the authenticity made them feel uncomfortable?
Yes, actually, from my occupational therapist, and so that was quite interesting. But I also know that she's quite conservative when it comes to intimacy and sex. But like in terms of actually,
So can I ask, is she disabled?
no, she's not. And that's what's interesting about this person in particular is that I've had her in my life for the past 20 years. She's now become like a second mother figure to me. She lives, one street over from my parents, so I would see her all the time. And she's actually become more close-minded about disability the longer she's been in her OT role,
Oh, wow.
which is really interesting.
Well, it's been so lovely to be able to pull you into this conversation, Emma. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Alicia. Alicia, what is it like to participate in Better Date Than Never? Was it an inclusive and accessible environment to work in? Tell us a bit about it.
So, one of the experiences that I had was the first kind of day. I had a counselor come. We had like a Zoom counseling meeting, and she basically said, if you feel disappointed about it, you just, you're gonna feel that disappointment. And one of the things that I loved so much about the Better Date Than Never team was that there was all different sorts of people with disabilities. Some were from different states, and also I was able to, stay connected with some of those people, like the team. And it was just so wonderful. And the inclusion of being a part of the Better Date Than Never was just incredible. And it was actually my first time, going on the date, 29 years. And it was at a theme park. And it was like one of my ultimate dreams, to have a date. And I will say that even though I didn't get my date, I'm still looking for my true love's prince.
Again, and that can happen not on a TV show. My next question is to you, Veronica. How do you approach disability representation, maybe through your bus stop films work, and what can people learn from that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we see leadership as the kind of thing that's called servant leadership or service leadership now. And really, our main role as tutors with Bus Stop is to be a facilitator and a conduit, really, to share skills and facilitate the stories, the lived experience, the way in which people with disability want to tell stories on film. And I've just noticed Emily Dash is up there too. So yeah, Groundhog Night was my great pleasure. It's one of Bus Stop's films. We were able to share that in a public forum a couple of weeks ago. And Emily might even want to speak to that herself. But the stories that we tell may not always necessarily on film have a person with disability. So the film that my team made this year was more about, the group had more of a somber feel this year, and they were concerned about the state of the world, and they wanted to say something about relationship. So we ended up having, we didn't feature a person with disability. It was two people. I can't say too much because I don't want to give the spoilers away, but the team actually didn't want to tell a story about disability. They wanted to tell a story about being human this year. And I thought that was exciting. Whereas last year, it was quite a different feel that we had. Last year we did a Christmas film and it was a black comedy, and it was about power relations between a landlord and a person with lived experience of disability. Again, these stories are coming from the community members, the members who come each week, and it's our job as tutors to find the best way to pull the stories together in relationship and as equals. It's equal storytellers. We're not there for our own agenda, Ellie. But
Wow, I
it's a
really
great
want to
role
see that
too.
Christmas movie. I love Christmas movies, and a power dynamic between a landlord and someone with lived experience. That's just like so many parallel loves coming together. That's amazing. Alicia, I'm just wondering, sorry, how do you think disability is being shown in TV and film? What do you think is being done well, and what do you think could be improved?
That's a very good question. I am very, very big on authenticity and the realness of people who have autism or have a disability. So, for example, I want to do a comparison of two great TV shows. One is The Heartbreak High, which you have autism activist slash advocate Chloe Hayden, and then you have The Good Doctor, which is played by someone who is not autistic. Now, what the difference is between the two is that one of them is actually autistic and one of them is not. And when I see people like that, that real autism, authentic acting, it makes me go, that's it. However, with someone that is, famous, or someone who's doesn't know anything about people with disability or anything about people with autism, they think about it and then they're like, okay, I'm doing it. And there are different people, like you've got Sheldon Cooper, you've got Dr. Sean Murphy, and you've got the Maddie from Dance Moms who played someone with autism. Now, those three do not have autism or a disability. So that's my perception.
Yeah, it's really important to have disabled people in roles that are portraying disabled people. That's how you get authenticity, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
And Chloe Hayden is a rock star on and off the screen, I have to say. Check out her work in Heartbreak High. It is fantastic show, and I love that not every episode about her character is about her disability, and that's what makes it even more fabulous. Is she's like multi-dimensional, and that's also what brings authenticity, is when a character it's not always about their disability. It's about the fact that she has fantastic fashion, and she has this incredible best friend who's queer that she's supporting, and other things. So make sure you check out Heartbreak High. I think it's on Netflix. If you've got it, it's a great show. That's my recommendation. I'm keen to hear, Todd, do you have a recommendation for a show or a movie that is good representation for people with disability?
Yes, it's also on Netflix. It's called 37 Seconds. It's a Japanese film about a young adult woman who has cerebral palsy and the trials and tribulations of wanting to carve out an identity on her own and moving away from the disability, and in some ways her Japanese culture too. And there's a very significant reason why the title of the film is called 37 Seconds. So that's a little teaser to end on. I would recommend that to everybody who's interested in not just filmmaking with people with disability, but also filmmaking in general.
Elle, do you have a recommendation?
Look, I'm not sure whether I would deign it with a recommendation, but some of my trash TV things that I like are procedural crime shows because I'm, terrible in my TV taste. But one of the things I really like is quite ordinary inclusion of people with disability in TV. As people have said, not talking about disability, but just doing their jobs or being a nurse or, rocking along the street. And the NCIS universe, the various shows that they've all created, they have a number of significant characters, like main characters, who are people with disability, wheelchair users, short-statured people, just doing their thing, being in charge. They're not one-off characters. And it means that kind of shows like that are doing more than, as you said, Alicia, that kind of people portraying a disabled character who are not disabled, but these are just ordinary disabled people doing their job as cops, but computer people or the boss or whatever they're doing. And I think that's the kind of ordinary stuff where you just go, oh, this is cool. Like they've just got an ordinary accessibility stuff as part of the office, or just something really ordinary that is not kind of making a fuss, or even in a show about, not that I don't love shows about disability, but it's great to have that kind of inclusion in other kinds of shows as well.
Can I just pop up and say, I don't know how everyone else feels about this, but I particularly love a new character with a disability in the Doctor Who universe. And specifically there's the scene where she's in a powerful position, and they've got to go investigate a rocket ship and she can't get upstairs, and the soldiers look at her and she just says, "Don't make me your problem, get up there." And so just in kind of oh yeah, and the accessible TARDIS, but I kind of loved that scene, and also the sex education scene where the disabled character calls out everyone's bias when he can't even get up to his class because his private school's lift is broken.
Elle is aware that I am currently binge watching a show called Madam Secretary, which is like the most like fluffiest show on American politics ever. And in her office, there is a person in a wheelchair that often comes up to her, the Secretary of State, and gets her to sign things. And like it doesn't happen once, just like one off. Like this person like who works in her office and gets her to sign things is always wheeling up to her and getting her to sign things, and I'm always like so excited that it's not like mentioned she's in a wheelchair or like it's just someone who works in the office and gets her to sign things, and it's totally ordinary that it happens all the time, and I'm like, there goes the wheelchair worker. I'm so excited. But it is the small things sometimes that like make it just so ordinary, and I love that. But I'm sorry, Emma.
I was just gonna say that's like the what is it? The person who works in the morgue on Silent Witness. And she's got spina bifida or some other disability where she's in a chair, but that the character wasn't meant to have, and now she's just there cutting open dead bodies and wheeling around the morgue. A bit morbid, but
we have such low expectations, don't we? But I wanted to know from maybe you, Veronica, we clearly from Emma's like experience with latecomers, it's clear that we need people with disability to be in all roles behind the camera, not just on the camera, so stories are genuine and authentic. How do we encourage and support people behind the scenes as well?
Well, I speak from the Bus Stop Films model, and you'll see there that Emily also mentioned that we just had an amazing 3-day summit with Bus Stop Films, bringing all sectors of the screen industries together to talk about this issue, about how we really create real job opportunities and those attachments for people with disability, opportunities for people to join writers' rooms. One of the things that we do a number of things with Bus Stop Films. It's been going for 15 years now, for those of you who don't know. It's called Bus Stop because our founder met Jared at a bus stop, a man with disability, with Down syndrome, disability, who shared with her that day that he had a frustration. He could recite Shakespeare and no one would give him an opportunity to act. And from there, Genevieve made her first short film with Jared featuring him reciting Shakespeare. So when you look at that, that was the impetus for this organisation. Organically, it's grown and it's been built upon those particular values. So we have professional people coming in and working with our team every year to make our films. So, for example, Alicia and myself and our teams up here in Brisbane have worked with Fung Ching Shang. Now, he has been our DOP. He's made it his business to be on our shoots for the last 4 years. Fung's film has just been featured in the top 10, one of the films he makes in the mainstream. He made it over in the Philippines. It's been in the top 10 in Netflix globally. So we have professional caliber people coming in and working side by side, mentoring our filmmakers. And Alicia can speak to you about, she's first AD'd with another professional award-winning gentleman, Dan. We also had Miranda Porter, who is a female cinematographer, another area that is underrepresented in terms of female practitioners as cinematographers. We've had Miranda come in and work with us. So it's all about upskilling and opening up the doors of opportunity and treating people as we would any colleague, because that's exactly why we're all there, sharing a love of film and wanting to create magic together. And that's pretty much how we roll, really, Ellie, is come on in, learn the skills, get on set, make a film, go to a film festival and have a beer. That's pretty much how we roll.
Sounds good to me.
I've changed my mind by what my biopic's gonna call, because that's how I roll.
Sounds good to me. I just want to pull up the answers to see what our audience have said about disability representation, to see if there's been any more additions. I don't know if there have, but I just want to check in and make sure. I know there's been a lively chat happening in the chat section. I've seen it move quickly. This has been an incredible chat. Has there been any more additions to the disability representation question? There has been. Wonderful. There's not enough diversity. Non-disabled people still portraying people with disability. That's right. I'm also done with seeing disability as a plot device. Not enough. Sometimes it seems short-term and superficial. People might have a positive experience and then it doesn't lead to any long-term opportunities or support. Not well as it could be done, needs more inclusivity and diversity. Would like to see more shows with people who have disabilities, including cooking shows. Oh, well, as somebody who wouldn't know my way around my own kitchen, that sounds like it could be interesting. Prior's working on a cooking show, so there you go. It's all happening. I want to end on a positive note. And Alicia, I think it may come from you, which is, what do you see as the good things that are happening in media representation and TV and movie representation at the moment? What are the things that are happening that you think are going to make the biggest difference to how people with disability are represented?
I think a lot of things are gonna happen in the future. I hope to see in the future that we see a lot more people with disabilities like get involved in like TV shows or like just dream big and also being able to not just be yourself, but be unique and have like a sense of fashion, have fun with it. And also join Bus Stop Films. It's a really fun, inclusive film thing that happens almost every month. And I recommend it for people who love films or who are over 18 because it's just a wonderful program. You get to learn so much about the filming industry. Like there is like non-stop information that you can get about filming and television, etc.
Sounds awesome. Well, thank you both to Veronica and Alicia and to all our panelists for chiming in on what has been a great discussion. But it's not the end. Last but not least, we have the brilliant Sue Onley from Melbourne University. Sue, welcome.
Thank you, Ellie. That's not sure I warrant that introduction.
Oh, yes, you do. And like, what a jump from film and TV to foundational support. How great.
I know it was such a great discussion, and I hope that people don't feel like this is too much of a veer in direction, because what we're really talking about with our survey findings is what does it take for people with disability to feel included and to be included in what's going on?
Yes, well, as people might remember, we ran our disability discovery project on foundational support a few months ago. Hello? Are you right, Sue?
I don't think that was me.
Okay, that's all good. And we wanted to know what supports people liked and what supports people wish they had in their lives to make it better. The survey has been analysed and Sue is here to tell us about the results. While they're talking about that, we're keen to hear your thoughts on our survey and how it could be made better. The link is in the link to the Menti is in the chat. But really, I want for you to take it away, Sue. What insights did our survey find?
Okay, so the important part of that is that it is your survey. So this was a survey that the Disability Dialogue designed and did. The survey and the data set belong to you. So this was the disability community asking people with disability about things that matter to them. So even though I'm from a university talking about it, I want you to know that we came at it from that angle. So the survey asked people about supports that make a big difference in their lives, supports that they wish they had and why they don't have them, and what they know or want to know about foundational supports. And 290 people answered the survey. And so we're going to share some of the things that were said in the survey. So most of the people who answered the survey were a person with disability or a family member of someone with disability. Of the 290 people who responded, 186 of them were NDIS participants. So we've got about a 4-to-1 ratio of NDIS and non-NDIS participants among the people with disability who replied. The rest of the people who answered the survey did not have a disability. They support people who had a disability. Most of the people who answered the survey lived in Queensland, New South Wales, or Victoria. And they had lots of different kinds of disability. And interestingly, we asked people about what type of disability they had. And a a number of people identified 5 or more types of disability, which tells us what we already know, that disability is complex. And so the more we know about that, the better. So what we heard from people who took the survey, most people said that a disability support worker made the biggest difference in their lives. But what we tried to do was to go into the survey responses and say, what was it that they actually wanted that disability support worker to do? And that revealed the kinds of things that were important to people. So although we asked about the support that they wanted, we also understood that having access to social activities that allow them to connect with others was really important. They also said it was really important to be able to get around easily, to do the things that they wanted to do. And when we asked people about how they found this support that made a difference in their lives, most of them found it through talking to other people, through their families and their friends. And so that tells us a bit about the kind of investment that government makes into channels of communicating with people with disability and promoting supports. So what we heard about supports that people liked, as I said, it was they really liked social activities. They really liked therapy. They liked being able to go and get therapy that they needed outside the house. Home cleaning and cooking was very important to people. Support to find or keep work was a pretty common theme. But balancing against that, people also talked about the challenges of balancing a disability and work, particularly people who didn't have NDIS supports. Transport is an issue. Housing is difficult, both in terms of cost and being accessible. And also things that people liked were supports for particular needs like Auslan or a wheelchair. I just noticed in the chat that someone said that people without a disability that didn't know a person with disability answered. I'm sorry if that was misleading. People who responded to the survey either had a disability or were working with a person with disability or were a family member of a person with disability. So I'm sorry if that wasn't clear. I hope that clarifies. So I think we should move on now to the supports that people told us that they wish they had. And in a way, some of this reflects, I think, the fact that a lot of people who responded were NDIS participants, because a lot of people said they wanted a disability, they wished they had a disability support worker, but a number of people said they just wished they had access to social activities that allowed them to connect with people. They wish they had an accessible way to go places. Again, transport, but also just easy moving around their community. And also 19 people said that they wished they had particular services or therapies that they needed. So most people with disabilities said they couldn't access these supports that they needed or wanted, either because they weren't available where they live, but also frequently because it costs too much. And this is really important to note, I think, that the costs of living with a disability are so underrepresented in discussion about disability services and support and employment. And so this was an interesting finding for us in the survey. So moving on, what families and supporters of people with disability wished for, again, a support worker or more hours of support was a common theme in the responses. But a number of people said that they wished that there was more support for families and carers. Some people found it very hard to figure out the services that they needed or how to find the services that they needed, particularly how to find them seemed to be a challenge. And some people said they didn't have the supports they needed, again, because they were not available or because they cost too much. So again, we're continuing the theme of the responses around what people said about when they said they wished they had more support hours or a disability support worker. We tried to separate what they actually wanted from the support itself that they told us about. And you can see some examples here where a person just says, I wish I had more one-on-one support to do more of the things that I love. But that was a support worker. Again, I wish I had a support worker to go out into the community or to help me with cooking. And then other examples included, someone to help me with school, someone to help me learn how to drive, someone to help me to travel. So it's thinking about all the different ways that just support actually facilitates people being part of the community and doing the things that they want to do. So on that note, we're going to move to the real question that we wanted to get to in the survey, which was we asked people what they knew about foundational supports and what they wanted to know, because there's so much unknown about foundational supports, like who'll be eligible for them, how much money is being invested in them, who's going to deliver it, all of these things. And that actually came through strongly in the survey. So people really didn't know what they were. They didn't know who was going to decide what they were or who was going to choose who would get them or who would be eligible for what in that foundational support space. They didn't know who was going to pay for them. They didn't know what supports were going to be available. And they also weren't sure how they fitted in the NDIS scheme of things. Would they be part of an NDIS package? Would they be something separate from that and different from that? So there's a lot that was unknown about foundational supports, which is not a surprise. And given that this survey was a little bit earlier in the year, I'm not sure that we're very much advanced from that. And I'd be really interested to hear from the audience later when we have our discussion about whether you think that the communication around foundational supports from government has got any better or clearer. So there are a few important things that we learned from this survey and about this survey. So some really key messages were that people with disabilities said that they had a hard time getting the support they need because either it's not available, it's not accessible, or it's not affordable. And this really confirms what has been said time and again in inquiries, in research, in the Royal Commission, all of these things. And so from the point of view of the disability dialogue, it's really saying these messages are coming through so clearly. What is it going to take to shift this? People with disability really want support with their day-to-day lives. They want support to connect them with other people. They get a lot of their information from talking with friends and family, as I said. And so what we want to think about is how does that become the next step for the disability dialogue and perhaps the next step of the disability discovery project? So first of all, I think the survey was a great tool to tell us that it's really important to listen to people with disability and their families, to understand what's important to them, how they think and their experiences as they go through big changes in their life, and also what they need, how what they need changes over their life, because people don't always need the same thing consistently. It's really important to know what people with disability like and what they wish they had, so that when foundational supports and the NDIS and the broader system of accessible mainstream services is in a state of flux like it is now, that we can actually design systems, services and supports that really work and that meet people with disability at where their needs and circumstances are. So it's important for people with disability to be really involved in designing these supports. And this survey is going to help the disability dialogue to tell government what the community wants.
All right, so much
guess,
there to unpack. I'm going to come back to you with a question, but Elle, I'm just struck that so much of this is really about connection, community connection, and it comes back to where we started this conversation tonight, which is what do we need to do to really change the conversation around inclusion and how people with disability are included in their communities? Because what the results of the survey said time and time again is people with disability just want to feel connected and included in their communities. So how do we ensure that foundational support is a tool that helps to change the way we look at inclusion and really is a way that we can start to make that community connection possible?
It's such a really good question, Ellie, and it's something I'm thinking a lot about. I know Sue and I have had lots and lots of big conversations about how do we do this? Like, how can we propose the magic solution? I'm not sure that that magic solution actually exists, but I do know that disabled people and their families have lots of the answers if they're given half a chance. And I think that the answer to our exclusion is including us in the delivery of foundational supports. And I'm being really serious about that. Like, we can't actually tolerate foundational supports being delivered by big corporate NGOs that don't have any, connection to us, to our communities, to the knowledge, the deep knowledge that we all have about what feeling excluded actually feels like, and then what real inclusion could feel like. I think that I worry that, we'll end up with something from a bunch of folks who also run disability employment services that will look nothing like the people who responded to the survey and talked about. But I also think that for some disabled people, the NDIS has increased the exclusion, for example, that a lot of, people now don't see anyone except for disability support workers. And that inclusion in the community that was so much part of the dreams of the Productivity Commission report, back in the olden days, really talked about, playing footy and getting a job at Bunnings and being part of the local fire and rescue service and whatever it was. But none of that has really happened, particularly for people with intellectual disability. And I think that that is one of the things that we've got to tackle very accurately and, particularly to make sure that the community understands what that inclusion means, but start doing some of the boring behind the scenes stuff about changing parts of the NDIS. So they're not keeping to push people into disability only services and disability only places, but actually pushing us out into the community. And, as Sue found in the survey, like, people just need transport. They want to be invited places. They want to go and do stuff with their friends.
They want to walk. They want to walk on the beach. Like, that was an answer I was given when I was helping someone like fill in the survey. Is I just want to be able to walk along the beach.
Exactly.
Like, that's
It's
how
not
simple
fancy.
people. No. So you're an expert in policy, and you will have seen many government policies come and go. How do we get the message through to government, the message Elle's talking about, that people with disability need to be central to the design of foundational supports? They talk a lot about co-design. We hear co-design, co-design, co-design. How can we actually make them do it?
So first of all, I should say that it wasn't just me looking at the survey findings. I also worked with Sophie Yates, who's at ANU, and Helen Dickinson from UNSW Canberra, and we really combed through these survey responses, and because we have grappled with these kind of complex system issues for years in our work. And so what we really need to say is what you're saying is, how do you shift the power to people with disability in this process of building an evidence base for policy? Because what is never clear in this process really is the government asks people with disability all the time for advice about what should be done, for submissions, for comment on consultation papers. But we never know how that evidence is weighed up or weighted in the policy process. So I think, just to be a little bit more transparent, to call for government to be more transparent about how it is using evidence that's provided to things like the Disability Royal Commission, the NDIS review. How is it actually shaping policy, or is policy just being made behind closed doors? Because there's an enormous amount of work and emotional labour that goes on in the disability community to contribute to this process. And so, it's formalising that process and saying you need to be at the centre of this discussion. And that also involves some hard conversations about eligibility for services where resources are scarce. It's understanding budgets and decisions that have to be made in that space. But also saying, if these messages are so consistent and there's been so little change over such a long period of time, something has to shift. And I think that the decision, the conversation that you're having about putting people with disability in the driver's seat of that makes sense.
Absolutely. Todd, you're a policy nerd like the rest of us. I'm going to ask you the same question. Where they talk about co-design. How do we actually get them to do it? How do we shift the power to people with disabilities so that we're at the centre of designing things like foundational supports?
First of all, the government has to mean what they say and actually put people with disabilities in position of power. You might have heard me at the beginning of this session sort of lay into the government, but one of the things that is really commendable is that they've increased the lived experience representation of the NDIA board. Prior to them getting into power, there were no people with disabilities on the NDIA board, shockingly. But I'm concerned that foundational supports will turn into a bit of a football politically, because the federal government is basically saying to the states, it's your turn to pony up some prospects in terms of delivering supports in much the same way they were delivering supports prior to the NDIS. But even since the federal government has established the agreements with the states, 2 states have changed governments. So as we go into rougher political waters, so to speak, what is the foundational support agreement going to look like between the federal governments and the states? And how is that going to translate into real action? And when is it actually going to come into effect? One of the things that I was appalled about in the Senate committee around the legislation is that government senators didn't even know what the definition of foundational supports actually was, and actually interviewing disability advocates and policy experts about what the definition of their own policy was. And that to me was rather telling.
Well, we have to finish up our conversation, sadly. I want to finish it up on the point of I think we shouldn't be asking for power. I think we should be going in there and taking power. And for that, it requires organising and it requires coming together, which is exactly what the disability dialogue is all about. We will continue to organise, have conversations, bring people together from all parts of the disability sector. And I really want to thank you for being part of this evening. It's part of the conversation. It's part of how we take back power and how we start to organise around these important issues. So thank you for that. Thank you to all our amazing panelists and our amazing Auslan interpreters. We're always keen to hear from you. Absolutely. What topics matter to you? What do you want to see in terms of our next dialogue to focus on? We're also really committed to growing our community. The more voices in our dialogues, the better and the stronger we become. So if there's someone you know who needs to be here next time, send them to our website, disabilitydialogue.com.au. We'll see you at the next one. Have a great night, everyone.